I remember the first time I wandered into that forgotten valley. The forest was thick with fog, each tree rising like a pale shadow against the sky. My lantern flickered, and with every gust of wind, I thought I heard a whisper moving between the branches. The silence there wasn't normal. It pressed against me, heavy and humming, as though the air itself was alive. My boots sank into damp soil, and somewhere far ahead, a single light glowed faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat in the distance. I thought it was a village, a safe place to rest. But the closer I walked, the more the light seemed to shift, as if it didn't want me to reach it. My breath felt cold in my chest, my skin tingled, and that's when I realized I wasn't alone. That's when I saw it. It was late autumn, the kind of night when fog gathers low across the river. I remember the smell of wet wood and the pale shimmer of the water below. The bridge was old. Wooden planks darkened by years of rain and moss. It leaned slightly, like it was tired of holding itself together. I should have turned back. But the road behind me was nothing but endless trees. And the bridge was the only way across. Halfway down the slope, I noticed it. A lantern swaying gently at the center of the bridge. The strange part was, the air was still. Not even the trees moved. Its glow was weak. More ember than flame. But it was the only light for miles, so I stepped forward. Each plank shifted under my weight, groaning softly like voices trapped in the wood. I tried not to listen. But the sound carried too far. My footsteps should have been alone. 1 step, 2 steps, and yet the echoes stretched out longer than they should have. It was as if someone walked just behind me, matching my pace. Perfectly, I slowed. The echo slowed. I stopped. The echo did not. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The fog pressed in close to my skin, and the lantern swayed again, not side to side this time. Forward, backward, as though it nodded, in rhythm with the steps. I looked over my shoulder. Nothing but mist. Nothing but darkness, rolling against the edges of the bridge. I told myself it was only the river, water shifting against the pilings. But the sound was too sharp, too close, too human. The lantern flickered when I reached it. Its frame was rusted, glass-chipped and cloudy. I raised a hand as if to steady it. But the moment I touched the metal, the light throbbed. Brighter for a second, then dimmer, then still. The creaking wood behind me grew heavier, like more than one set of feet now. Slow, measured, unhurried. I didn't turn around. I kept walking step after step toward the end of the bridge. The lantern burned weaker, as though it was following me with its last strength. Then it went dark. Not a slow fade, but an abrupt breath, snuffed out. The bridge fell into silence. No creaking, no echoes, only the soft pull of the fog. I should have felt relief. But the weight of the air grew heavier with every step forward. And from behind me, the footsteps continued, not faint, not distant, but steady, as though someone had just begun to follow. I crossed the final plank and set foot on solid ground. The trees closed in again, black trunks rising like shadows. For a heartbeat, I thought I'd escaped. Then the bridge groaned once more, a deep, dragging shift, as though many feet moved at once. Crossing after me, I didn't look back. I walked into the trees, the pale mist curling around my ankles. But every few steps, I still heard it, the slow, careful weight of something that was no longer bound to the bridge. And sometimes, when I dream of that night, I see the lantern again, swinging gently in the dark, as if it never went out. As if it's waiting. It was late autumn. The mountain air carried that thin, brittle chill, the kind that makes every breath drift like smoke. Our village was always quiet after dusk. Only the trees, bending in the wind, and the soft crackle of lanterns. At the center of the square stood the old stone well. No one touched it. No one even lingered near it. Children whispered rules about it. Never go close after dark. Never answer the voice that sang from inside. I thought it was a game at first. Just one of those stories meant to keep us obedient. But the older I grew, the more I noticed. On still nights, when the sky was pale with stars, a voice floated up from the stones, thin, gentle, almost sweet. It didn't sound frightening. It sounded lonely, like a lullaby that never finished. I remember pausing by the window once, hearing it drift through the square, A woman's voice, soft and steady, humming to herself. Others pretended not to hear. Doors locked, curtains drawn. But I leaned closer to the glass. Something about it pulled at me, promising warmth, promising rest. I told myself it was just an echo, maybe a bird nesting in the hollow. Yet deep down, I knew it was none of those things. The well had been here longer than the houses, longer than the cobblestones, older than anyone could remember. One evening, curiosity dragged me from my room. The square was empty, shadows clinging to the walls. I walked toward the well. The voice was waiting, softer than I'd ever heard it. Almost a whisper. It didn't sound far below. It sounded close. As if the singer had climbed halfway up the stones, I stood just a step away. The moss on the bricks was damp beneath my hand. The cold pressed through my skin. The song wavered. Then it stopped. Only silence filled the night. I thought I imagined it. But then a slow breath rose from the dark, warm, against my face. I froze. The hair at the back of my neck prickled. Someone was down there. Someone impossibly near. My heart stumbled in my chest. I leaned back. But the stones seemed to hold me. A voice, clear now, not singing, spoke in the faintest murmur. "You must be so tired." It was right at my ear, not below, not echoing. I staggered away, nearly tripping on the cobblestones. The well stood there silent, like it had never made a sound. For days after, I avoided the square. But the voice found me anyway, drifting through my shutters at night. The same song, low, patient, calling me back. I pressed my hands to my ears. But sometimes it wasn't through the air. Sometimes it hummed inside my chest. I asked others in the village if they heard it. Most turned away without answering. One woman whispered, "It remembers those who listen. I haven't gone near the well since. But even now, when the nights are longest, and the wind is still, I feel the breath against my ear again, soft, lingering, as though the stones themselves are waiting, and the song begins. Low and steady, promising warmth, promising rest." The fog was heavier than usual that evening. It pressed against my chest, damp, clinging to my clothes. Every step on the dirt path felt swallowed, muted. I couldn't tell how far I had walked. The world had thinned into nothing but pale outlines. A tree here, a fence post there, and then something darker, standing still in the whiteness. At first I thought it was a barn, a shape squared against the fog. But as I came closer, it sharpened into a house. Its walls were pale, almost gray like soaked paper. The roof sagged in the center. Windows sat like blank eyes along its face. But there were no doors. I circled it once, slowly, dragging my hand along the wet siding. Every side the same. Windows, but no entrance. And in one of those windows, something shifted, a shape. Not clear, not whole, just a ripple as though the glass had breathed. I froze. My own reflection hovered there, faint. But behind it, the dark sway of movement. The fog thickened at my back, and for a long moment, I could not turn away. When I finally stepped back, the house seemed to sink into the mist, its windows dulling, fading, until the shape was gone. I walked away without realizing I had quickened my pace. Each step carried a weight of silence. That night, I couldn't sleep. The air inside my room was too still. My lamp flickered once, though no wind touched it. And when I closed my eyes, the house returned. It stood not in the fog this time, but in the dark field behind my thoughts. Every window glowed faintly as though lit from within. Not warm light, but pale, like phosphorescence. Each square burned like an eye, blinking, watching me. I tried to dream of other things, but each shift of thought brought me back to its walls, its roofline cutting into the sky. And always those windows, pulsing. Inside there were movements, shadows pacing, their rhythm steady as though rehearsed. I could not see faces, only the drag of limbs against the glow. When I woke, my pillow was damp with sweat. The room smelled faintly of earth, though no window had been opened. And in the silence of early morning, I thought I heard a faint tapping, like fingertips against glass. I went to my window, half dreaming still. But outside was empty, only fog, curling softly against the pane. The house did not appear again on my walks. I searched, though I never admitted it out loud. Each evening, I let my steps wander farther from the path. Each time, only silence, yet at night. It waited, always there behind my eyes, always watching. Sometimes I dreamt of walking closer. In those dreams, the fog cleared. The walls grew sharper, the windows brighter, and I could see them more clearly. Not just shadows, but outlines of figures, pale, leaning against the glass, their faces pressed so close that I could almost make out mouths, opening, closing, as if trying to speak. But there was no sound, only silence. The windows would pulse brighter, the faces would blur, and when I looked down, my own hands were against the glass. On the other side, I never knew how the dream ended. I always woke too quickly, to the dim light of morning, to the faint hum in the air. But each time, I felt a little more certain that the house was not waiting in the fog anymore. It was waiting in me. And every night, its windows glow a little brighter, watching, listening, waiting for me to step inside. The river was always quiet at dusk, a long, slow stretch of pale water moving without hurry. Mist gathered over the reeds and the trees bent low as though listening. It was there that the woman was found. She lay on the soft grass of the riverbank. Her dress was damp, her skin cold, but her chest rose and fell. She was breathing. The villagers carried her into town. They wrapped her in blankets, placed her by the fire, waited for her eyes to open, but she never stirred. Her face was drained of color, her lips faintly parted, her breathing so soft it could be mistaken for the rustle of leaves outside. By morning, she was gone. Not gone from the world, but back at the river, in the same place, the same angle of her head. Her pale hands folded just above the grass. They carried her again. A stronger rope of arms, firmer voices. They locked the doors this time, barred the windows, yet by nightfall, she was back. Always by the river, always asleep. The elders whispered about omens. Some thought she had drowned once before, and the river had claimed her soul. Others believed she was dreaming her way back. That something beneath the water was calling. No one dared touch the river after dark. The nights grew heavier, her presence a weight against the silence. People passed the river quietly, pretending not to see her still form, bathed in moonlight. She never woke, never shifted. Her breathing never faltered until the third week. That night, a hum began. Low at first, like a breeze threading through reeds. But it wasn't the wind. It was her. Her lips barely moved, her breath releasing the faintest melody, a lullaby, unfamiliar, but so calm, so slow, it stilled the heart of anyone who heard it. Villagers stood at a distance, their lanterns trembling in their hands. None dared approach. They only listened, the song circling the fog, carrying over the black water. Some said the river answered, that ripples formed without cause, moving against the current, pulling toward her. The hum grew each night. Never words, just sound. A soft vibration, low and steady, seeping into the soil. Children woke crying. Dogs refused to leave their kennels. The town's wells tasted faintly of silt. Every morning when the sky broke pale, her humming stopped. And the woman was still again, breathing, waiting. The villagers tried prayers, tried salt at the windows. One night they even tried ropes, tying her to the beams of a barn, her body limp, her face serene. By dawn, the ropes lay empty, knotted but hollow, and she was back at the water, humming softly in her sleep. No one touched her again. Seasons edged forward. Leaves browned, then fell. The river narrowed with frost. Still she lay there, unmoved by snow or rain. Sometimes her hair froze into the grass. Sometimes insects crawled over her hands, and she never stirred. Her humming grew clearer. No longer just a lullaby, but closer to words, almost like names. Names whispered, half-formed, sliding back into melody. People avoided the river now. They said even the air near her was wrong. Too cold, too still. And those who lingered carried the tune home in their ears. Some swore they heard it in their sleep. A faint hum just outside the window, as though she were lying in the grass below, waiting. One by one, doors began to close earlier. Lanterns dimmed. The town's streets emptied before dusk. Only the river kept moving. Only her body stayed the same. And then, one morning, she was gone. The bank was bare. The grass pressed down where she had lain. But no body, no trail. Just silence. The village waited for her return. The first night passed. Then the second. But she did not appear. Only the river remained. Its surface perfectly smooth. A pale light shifting through the fog. Some claimed to hear the humming still, faint, far below the surface, as if the river itself had learned her song. Others swore she was not gone, only waiting for the next passerby to hear the tune and lie down beside her, and the reeds bent lower as though they, too, were listening. The hills near my village always seemed to breathe on their own. In summer, the grass swayed like a restless sea. In winter, the ridges vanished into pale fog, as if the earth itself had hidden its face. But at dusk, the air changed. Every evening, as the last light clung to the horizon, a rhythm rose from the slopes, a steady beat. Soft at first, like hands upon stretched skin, drums. No one lived out there. No gatherings, no fires. Just stone and dirt and the silence of old trees. Yet the beat always came, measured, patient, as though waiting for someone to listen. The elders told us it was nothing to fear. They said the hills remembered, that the sound was only memory, a way for spirits to find their path back to the village. I wanted to believe them, but each evening the rhythm seemed to pull harder, not toward the village, but away from it. I would pause in my doorway at dusk, the sky bruised purple, the air turning colder, and there it was again, distant, hollow, steady, badum, 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 like a heartbeat buried in the hills. I tried not to listen. But some nights, the silence inside my room felt heavier than the sound outside. The drums called, and I could not close my ears. One evening I left. The fields were empty, the path narrow, lined with stones slick from years of rain. With each step, the beat grew sharper, not louder but closer, as though the hills themselves were breathing beneath my feet. The air smelled of wet soil and pine needles. Moths flickered past, drawn to nothing, returning to nothing. The rhythm did not falter. Badum, badum, badum. I followed, up the ridge where the wind thinned, where even the crickets fell quiet. A pale moon rose, shivering through a veil of clouds. The path bent and opened into a clearing, and there the drums stopped. The silence struck harder than any sound. It rang through the trees. It pressed against my chest. I stood very still. The clearing was empty. No fire, no figures. Only the round impression of earth in the center, as though it had been beaten smooth by hands that had never rested. I could feel my breath catching. The night pressed down, close and cold. My ears rang with the memory of the rhythm that was no longer there. I waited, for it to return, for anything to stir. But the air was still. And the hills? The hills were watching. A shift of cloud passed over the moon. Shadows stretched long across the clearing. For a moment I thought I saw something move, a line in the dirt, a mark, too straight to be chance. It curved, like a circle drawn by unseen hands. I took one step forward. The earth felt hollow beneath me, like a drumhead, waiting. I held my breath. And in that silence, I felt the beat again, not in the air, not in the ground, but inside my chest. Badum, badum, badum. I turned back toward the village. The path behind me was darker now, swallowed in mist. The rhythm did not leave me. It walked with me. It sank into my bones. By the time I reached my door, the hills were silent again. But the echo remained, steady, endless. I lay awake that night listening. The room was quiet, the air unmoving. Yet I could still feel it, as though the hills had placed their memory inside me. And I wondered, if I had followed the drums one step further, would the silence ever have let me go? The school was the only building left standing. Its roof sagged, its paint peeled. But the bell tower still leaned against the pale sky like a broken tooth. I had come to the village in late autumn. The trees were bare. The air was damp and fog moved low across the fields. Every path felt forgotten. The locals never came near the school. They spoke of it in fragments, a warning hidden in their silences, and always the mention of one locked room. The rest of the classroom stood open, benches overturned, maps curled with damp, a smell of dust and mildew. But at the far end of the corridor, a door remained sealed, heavy iron hinges, the handle stiff with rust. At night, the windows rattled as if someone pressed against them from inside. And in the mornings, faint chalk words appeared on the blackboard behind the glass. Names, dates, sentences that ended halfway, like someone was still writing when time stopped. I told myself it was only moisture, shifting walls, old tricks of wood and air, but the thought clung to me. What was inside that room? One evening I stayed longer than I should have. The light fell early. The schoolyard was swallowed by shadow, and the corridor grew colder with every step. I reached the locked door. My hand hovered above the knob. Cold metal breathed against my skin. And then I noticed it, a thin crack where the wood had split near the frame. The gap was barely wide enough, but curiosity is stronger than sense. I leaned close. My breath fogged the air, and through that sliver of darkness I looked inside. At first I thought it was empty. The room looked wider than the others. Dust hung like smoke in the pale moonlight slipping through the high windows. Then I saw them, rows of children, small bodies seated at their desks, not moving, not breathing. Faces turned forward as if still waiting for a lesson to begin. Their eyes were black pools, mouths closed, tight, expressionless. But their heads tilted slightly as though they heard me. I froze. The silence pressed against my chest. And then, soft scratching. On the far wall, the chalk moved. I watched it glide, steady, across the blackboard. Letter by letter. No hand held it. It wrote a single word, slowly, patiently. Stay. My throat tightened. I stepped back, my shoe catching against the warped wood of the floor. The sound echoed too loud, too alive in that dead place. Inside, all the children shifted at once. Desks groaned softly beneath their weight, and though they never turned fully toward me, I felt their gaze pierce through the crack. I stumbled down the corridor, my breath sharp in my chest. The door remained closed behind me, but I knew the lock was weaker than before. I left the school that night. The fields outside looked endless, the village lights distant and dim. Even now I think of that room. I see the chalk writing appear again and again. Each morning a new word waiting on that board. And though I've never returned to look, I feel them sitting there still, silent, unmoving, waiting for me to come back. And sometimes, when the night is too quiet, I hear the faint tap of chalk, finishing the word it began long ago. Stay. The valley was quiet most nights, a kind of silence that pressed against the ribs. But then came the bell. It began as a faint toll drifting across the hills, slow, hollow, as if carried by the wind from somewhere far away. The first time I heard it, I thought it was a church bell. But there was no church here, no tower, no village at all, only scattered houses and empty fields. Still, the bell rang. It came at the same hour each night, when the fog began to roll down the slopes, settling in low waves across the grass. That was when the sound grew stronger, deeper, like it was moving closer, step by step, yet never seen. I tried to ignore it at first, but the sound wasn't something you could block out. It sank through the walls, through the windows. Through me, it vibrated in my bones. Like standing too near to a storm, neighbors heard it too, but no one spoke of it directly. Only a glance sometimes, across a fence or down a lane, as though naming it would bring it nearer. One evening, I stepped outside as the tolling began. The fog curled thick against the ground. Every strike of the bell sent the air trembling. I followed it. The sound led me down through fields damp with mist, through grass that clung wet against my legs. My breath made pale clouds in the dark. The toll grew louder and steadier, not distant now, but near. So near I felt the air push against my chest each time it struck. I thought I'd see a tower rise from the fog. A cross, a steeple, something. But the fields stayed bare, and then I saw it. The bell lay in the grass, half buried in the earth, rusted green and brown, its mouth cracked, its surface eaten away by time. It rang, but it did not move. The clapper inside was still. No rope hung from its crown. Yet with each strike, the air shook. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. The bell tolled again, and the fog rippled like water. Shapes shifted in it, tall, pale outlines that almost looked like figures. But when I blinked, they were gone. I wanted to step closer, to touch the metal. But my feet would not obey. Another toll. The grass bent flat, pressed by something unseen, as though the valley itself was bowing. My ears rang. The sound was inside me now, not around me. A pulse behind the eyes, a weight in the chest. I stumbled back. The bell remained still. But the toll continued. Low, endless, pulling the fog into shapes that lingered too long to be tricks of the eye. I turned and ran. By the time I reached the house, the fog had thinned. The sound faded back into the valley, and the silence returned. For a time, I thought maybe I imagined it, a trick of the air or my mind. But each night after, it came again. The same hour, the same fog, the same toll rattling in my bones. I tried to ask the oldest farmer down the lane. He only shook his head. His lips moved, but no words came, as though the bell had stolen his voice. Another neighbor shut her curtains when I mentioned it. Her hands trembled as she turned the lock on her door. I began to keep the windows closed. But still the sound came through. It hummed in the glass. It pressed against my chest as I tried to sleep. Sometimes I dreamed of the bell, and in those dreams, the figures in the fog were clearer. They stood in rows, their heads bowed, waiting, and always. The bell, unmoving, but ringing. Last night I forced myself back to the field. The fog was thicker than ever, the air so damp it clung to the skin. The toll was unbearable. My teeth ached with each strike. The bell was still there, lying in the grass, and yet I swear the earth around it had shifted, as though the ground itself was cracking open beneath its weight. I watched, shaking. The clapper swung once, just once, even though there was no wind. The sound was louder than before. The fog swelled, covering everything, and within it I saw the figures again. This time, they didn't vanish. They turned their heads. Toward me, I don't remember running back, only the silence after, the way it wrapped around the house like a shroud. Tonight, I hear nothing yet. The valley is still. The fog hasn't come, but I know it will, and when it does, the bell will toll again even without a tower, even without hands to ring it, and one night I fear it won't stop. The air near the ruined cottage was always colder, even in summer. A thin veil of ash lingered there, drifting low across the ground, like dust that never settled. The villagers avoided it. Some crossed themselves when they passed. Others simply walked faster, eyes averted. I didn't. I had grown up nearby. The story was always the same. The fire had swallowed the cottage decades ago, yet its skeleton remained, charred and hollow. But the strangest part was not the ruin itself. It was what appeared each dawn. Footprints, fresh, sharp imprints pressed into the soft layer of ash. Never scattered, never smudged, as if someone walked there every night. No one ever saw the walker. The tracks always began at the blackened threshold, and always led into the forest. By noon, wind or rain would erase them. But the next morning, new steps. Always the same size, always the same direction. I was younger then, but not brave. Just curious. And curiosity has its own way of punishing. One night, I stayed awake by the window. I thought maybe I'd catch whoever left them. But when the dark grew heavy and the silence pressed against my ears, I saw nothing, only the pale glow of moonlight on ruined stone, only the stillness of the trees. When dawn came, the footprints were there again, fresh, undeniable. I told myself I must have blinked, that I must have looked away, but something inside me whispered differently. I began walking the path of the prints, not at night, never at night, but in the mornings after they appeared. They led deeper and deeper into the trees, always farther than I remembered going. The steps felt deliberate, measured, as though whoever or whatever made them wanted to be followed. Yet they always ended, not fading, Not scattered, just stopping. Abruptly, as if the walker had vanished mid-step. I stopped going after a while, because there was no answer waiting, only the stillness of the woods and the echo of my own breath. The years passed. The village changed. Children grew up and left, new families moved in, but the cottage remained, and so did the whispers. By then I had learned not to listen too closely, until the morning when I woke to find the prince, not at the ruin, but at my door. The ash was wrong. It had no place on my steps, no reason to be there. Yet a trail of gray powder stretched across the ground, each mark pressed deep, each one perfectly formed. The first print sat at the threshold. The second, just before the frame. The third led inside. My breath felt heavy in my chest. I remember the stillness, the way the morning light seemed pale and thin, the way the quiet felt full, as if someone was holding it in place. I didn't step forward. I couldn't. The prince led across the floorboards, one after another, until they reached the table. And then the chair. The chair where my father used to sit, years before the fire. I hadn't thought of him in so long. The way his boots would leave marks by the door. The way the ash from the hearth always clung to him when he came back from the fields. I wanted to believe it was memory, nothing more. But the prints stayed sharp, and they did not fade. For days they remained there, no wind to scatter them. No time to soften their edges, just footprints in ash inside my home. The villagers would not come near, even those who once laughed at the stories. They crossed the street rather than look at my door. I tried sweeping, but the ash clung like it belonged there, each mark fixed in place as though burned into the grain of the wood. At night I thought I heard them again, soft movements on the floorboards, steps that didn't belong to me. The cottage has been gone for decades now, but I think perhaps it never left. Every morning I look down. Sometimes the floor is clean. Other times new steps appear, drifting across the room. They never lead out anymore, only farther in, deeper into the house. And I've stopped sweeping because I know who left them, and I know who waits at the end of the trail. Even now, I can feel the weight of his breath behind me, the faint scent of smoke, the soft, patient silence of someone who never left. It was late summer. The fields were tall, golden, almost ready for the harvest. The air was warm in the day, but at night the soil held onto a strange chill. I remember the stillness most of all, that quiet pause before the crickets began, the kind of silence that made you notice your own breathing. That's when I first heard it, a whistle, soft, carried on the breeze. It wasn't a farmer, not a boy playing. The tune was cheerful, too cheerful, almost like a lullaby, but twisted in some way I couldn't place. It carried across the wheat, like the stalks themselves were singing. And the more I listened, the more I realized. It wasn't random. It was calling. One note stretched out, then a pause, as if waiting for someone to answer. The villagers spoke about it in hushed tones. They said the whistle had been heard for generations, that it called names, always at night, always from the fields. Some swore that when the whistle called, the wheat moved, not with the wind, but with something unseen, as if parting for footsteps. I didn't believe it at first. I wanted to, but there's a difference between stories and standing there in the dark with nothing between you and the fields. One evening I lingered by the edge of the village. The lanterns were low. The sky had already turned black. And then, the whistle began again, slow, bright, almost playful. But wrong. The wheat shifted. A long line pressed open as if someone were walking through. But I saw no one. Only stalks bowing out of the way. I felt the chill in my chest, heavy like a hand. The tune changed. It paused between phrases, waiting, and then I heard it. My name, carried in the whistle, bent into the melody, so clear it froze me where I stood. The villagers were right. It wasn't a song. It was a calling. I wanted to turn away, but the wheat moved closer. I could hear the dry stalks brushing against each other, as though something was coming toward me. Not running, not rushing, just steady, patient, keeping time with the tune. I whispered to myself that it was a trick of the wind, that maybe someone was out there, playing with me. But the night was too still, too empty. I stepped back. The whistle followed. Always that same cheerful pattern, bending around my name. It grew sharper, as though whoever made it was smiling. The stalks at the edge of the field trembled. I swear I could see shapes within them, a pale hand brushing wheat aside, a shadow without a body. I ran, not into the house, not to the others, just away from the fields as far as I could, but the whistle followed. It didn't grow louder. It just never faded. Even when I was inside with the shutters closed, I could hear it. Faint, steady, like it had slipped under the door. That night, I barely slept. I woke with the dawn trembling, convinced I'd dreamt it. But outside, by the edge of the fields, the wheat was parted, a straight path. Leading almost all the way to my door, the villagers wouldn't look at me. They said once you hear your name in the whistle, it never forgets you. You can move houses. You can leave the village. But the fields, they'll always find you. And even now, years later, I still hear it sometimes, late at night. Soft, cheerful, waiting, calling my name, like the tune never ended, like it was only pausing, waiting for me to answer. It was late autumn, the kind of evening where the trees seemed emptied out, and the ground carried a damp chill. I had walked farther than usual that night. The trail cut into the woods, but the fog moved faster than me. It slid in low at first, clinging to the earth like pale smoke. Then it rose, until even the nearest branches looked drowned in white. That was when I heard it. A sound, soft, playful. A child's laughter. It didn't belong. Not out here. Not this far from the houses. At first, I thought I had misheard. The fog plays tricks, bending air, making birds sound closer. But then it came again. A giggle. Small, clear, right between the trees. I froze. My breath misted in the cold, trembling slightly. The laughter moved. Slipping just ahead of me, I couldn't see anyone. Only the shifting gray, but curiosity pulled at me. I stepped off the trail. The ground felt softer, wetter, leaves slick underfoot. The fog thickened, swallowing distance. Then, a shape, a small figure. Standing just far enough away, the child, or what looked like one, it was motionless, only an outline. A head, shoulders, arms at its side. I could never catch the details. Every time I blinked, the fog rearranged around it. Hello? My voice came out wrong, thin, almost swallowed. The figure tilted slightly, then laughter again. High, light, but echoing too long as though the trees carried it back in pieces. I tried to get closer. One step, then two, but the ground sank deeper. The fog pressed thicker. The figure never grew clearer. Always the same distance. Always just ahead. My chest tightened. The mist crawled into my throat. Each breath tasted of cold iron. I should have turned back, but I couldn't. Something in that laughter. It wasn't cruel, it was beckoning. I walked further. The branches overhead bent low, dripping water that didn't reach the ground. The silence between giggles grew longer, then shorter. Like it was circling me. I tried calling again, no answer. Just the faint slap of bare feet running deeper into the fog. I followed. I don't know why. The forest no longer felt familiar. Paths bent back into themselves. Roots tangled where no trees should grow. I was turning in circles. Then, silence. The laughter stopped. The fog stopped moving. I stood still. My heart hammered loud in my ears. For the first time, I realized how alone I was. The fog wasn't shifting anymore. It held like a wall, and in that stillness, something changed. The child wasn't ahead of me. I felt it before I turned. The faint warmth of another presence. So close I could hear the breath. I turned. There, behind me. A small figure, closer than I could bear. It stood in silence. No laughter. No movement. The fog framed its outline perfectly now. Too perfect. Like it wanted me to see just enough. A child's head, but the face lost in gray. Shoulders rising and falling with slow breaths. Still. Waiting. I couldn't speak. Every word caught in my throat. My legs felt rooted like the ground held me still. The figure tilted again, that same unnatural slant. And in the quiet, it whispered something. Not words, more like the faint hum of air slipping through hollow wood. A sound that chilled me deeper than the fog itself. I shut my eyes. For a long moment, I couldn't move. I prayed the mist would lift, that when I opened them, nothing would be there. But when I looked again, the fog had cleared. The The trees stretched tall, bare, familiar once more. The path was behind me. The silence was heavy. Almost kind, except the ground was damp in small circles, as if tiny feet had been standing there, right where I had been, and though the fog had lifted, I swear, I could still hear the faintest echo of a child's laughter, lingering, just behind me. The mountains were quiet that night. Snow lay heavy across the ground, swallowing sound, softening every step. I had set my tent near the ridge not far from the lake. They warned me not to. The villagers said the ice there never melted, not in spring, not even in the hottest days of summer. At first, I thought it was an exaggeration, a tale to keep children from wandering too far into the forest. But when I reached it, I saw the truth. The lake lay still, perfectly still. The surface was a mirror of pale blue glass, unbroken by time or weather. The snow did not cling to it. Even as flakes fell, they seemed to slide away, leaving the surface exposed. And beneath that surface, shapes, faint outlines pressed against the frozen barrier. Like faces caught mid-breath, their mouths open, their eyes blurred. I crouched close. The cold rose up through my boots, numbing me. It felt like the ice was alive, breathing against the air. The sky turned darker. Clouds pulled across the moon. I decided to stay anyway. I built a small fire near the edge. The glow flickered against the snow, against the glassy lake. Every time the wind shifted, it seemed to carry a sigh. The stillness of the place grew heavier. Even the trees nearby leaned away from the water, their branches brittle, bent. Lying in my tent, I could see the edge of the lake through the flap. The surface reflected the firelight in pale shimmers. I tried to close my eyes, but something kept me awake. A presence, a waiting silence, then a knock, soft, dull, from beneath the ice. I held my breath. At first, I thought it might be shifting water or a branch falling. But then it came again. Knock, knock, slow, deliberate. It sounded too heavy to be imagined, too human. I unzipped the tent. The fire was dying. The lake shimmered in the dim light. Another knock rose from deep below. The frozen surface trembled. My breath caught in the air, pale against the dark. I stepped closer, drawn against every instinct. The cold stung my face. The air felt thin, and then I saw it. A hand pressed upward through the ice. The shape of it clear, fingers spread wide. I staggered back, my legs weak. But the hand did not move. It simply stayed there, reaching. Another shape appeared beside it. A face. Mouth open in silence, eyes pale and wide. The knocking grew louder. Not from one place, but many. Like dozens of fists striking at once. I clutched my coat tighter, the cold burning through the seams. The surface of the lake shivered with faint cracks. Not breaking, just quivering, like glass under strain. The fire sputtered out completely. Darkness spread. Only the pale glow of the sky reflected across the lake. And then it stopped. No knocking. No shapes moving beneath. The silence returned, thick and endless. I stood there trembling, unable to move, afraid to turn away, afraid to stay. Finally, I stumbled back into my tent, pulled the zipper shut, lay awake, listening. The wind rustled faintly through the trees. The ice gave no more sound, but I could feel it. The pressure of unseen faces beneath, waiting, listening. The night stretched on, endless. I must have fallen asleep, but it was shallow, restless. When the pale light of dawn touched the ridge, I forced myself to rise. The lake lay silent in the morning haze, calm, untouched, but near the edge where I had stood, there were marks in the ice, scratches, thin lines etched into the glass, like fingernails dragged upward, desperate to break through. I could not look longer than a moment. The villagers were right. The lake never melts, and the things beneath it never leave. Even now, when I close my eyes, I can still hear the faint echo. Knock, knock, still waiting. For someone to answer. It was late autumn. The road was empty, covered in a thin veil of fog. I had been walking for hours. The only light coming from a pale sliver of moon. The forest finally broke. Ahead, tucked in the hollow of the valley, was a cluster of lanterns. Flickering, golden, warm against the cold night air. I thought I had found shelter. A village! a place where voices might greet me. As I stepped closer, the path widened. Stone houses, their windows glowing faintly. And at the center, long wooden tables stretched across the square. Every table was crowded. Plates heaped with roasted meats, steaming bread, bowls of fruit so ripe the skin glistened in the lantern light. The air was thick with the smell of smoke and sweet wine. Dozens of villagers sat around the feast. Men, women, even children. But none of them moved. Their eyes were closed, their hands resting gently on the table, frozen in postures of celebration. It felt wrong to disturb them. Yet the sight was so strange I couldn't stop staring. A woman in a pale shawl, her lips parted as if laughing, though no breath escaped. A boy with a wooden toy in his lap, one hand reaching toward a cup that would never be lifted. The lanterns swayed gently above us. Their light shifted across the still faces. I told myself, maybe they were praying. Some old ritual I had stumbled into, but the silence was unbearable. No rustle of clothing, no creak of chairs, only the faint hum of lantern fire. I stood there longer than I should have, waiting for someone to open their eyes, for a plate to clatter. For any sign of life, the food looked untouched. Steam rising as if it had just been served. I could smell the salt of roasted meat, the sweetness of grapes left too long in the sun. And then I blinked when my eyes opened. The lanterns were gone. The square was dark. No glow, no warmth, only the pale wash of moonlight. The tables were still there, but stripped bare, no food, no cups, no signs of life. The villagers were gone. Every chair sat empty. Every window in the houses stood dark. The smell of roasted bread had thinned into nothing. I stood in the center of the square, surrounded by silence so heavy it felt like a weight on my chest. Even the fog had crept closer, pressing in around the stone walls. I whispered aloud, though my voice trembled. "Hello?" The word carried no echo. It was swallowed whole by the night. I walked along the tables, fingertips brushing the rough wood. Cold. Dust clung to the surface, as if nothing had touched it in years. But I remembered the warmth of lantern light, the shine of fruit, the laughter frozen on a woman's lips. Had I imagined it? Was I so tired that my eyes had invented a feast? At the edge of the square, a single chair remained, tipped slightly back as if someone had just risen from it. The ground beneath still damp, darker than the rest. I waited there. Minutes passed like hours, hoping someone would return, but the village stayed empty. No lanterns relit themselves. No doors opened, only the whisper of wind through the fog. I stepped back onto the road, though my legs felt unsteady. Each footfall seemed too loud against the silence. When I looked over my shoulder, the village was almost gone from sight. Just shadows and stone swallowed by mist. Yet part of me swore I could still see the faint outline of a lantern glow. Not steady, but flickering, as if waiting. I kept walking. The forest closed in again. The night colder now, heavier. But the image stayed with me. The villagers sitting still, eyes closed, smiles frozen mid-gesture, and I couldn't decide which was worse, the feast that vanished, or the silence that remained. The air was damp that evening. A pale fog drifted low across the fields. It clung to the trees, the fences, even the grass under my shoes. The silence was steady. Only the faint hum of insects somewhere in the distance, and the occasional rustle of branches. I walked slowly, not sure why I felt drawn deeper. Every step felt softer than the last, swallowed by the mist. Then, a sound, light, like a chime. Laughter, a child's laughter, faint, carried through the fog, thin enough to almost vanish, yet sharp enough to pierce me. I stopped walking. The laughter continued, bouncing against nothing, circling, as if it had no source. I could feel my breath in the cold air. Each exhale broke the fog for only a moment. Then it folded back, thicker. Ahead, something moved, a small figure. Not close enough to see clearly, but I could tell it was a child. They stood so still, and then just as quickly they turned away, running deeper into the fog. The laughter followed. I don't know why I stepped after them. Curiosity, maybe, or something else. Each time I tried to close the distance, the fog grew heavier, pressing in, swallowing the edges of the path. My footsteps were quiet, yet in my ears they echoed loud, too loud. The figure remained ahead, never closer. "Always just out of reach," I called out, but the sound of my voice was flat. As if the fog had stolen it, my chest felt tight. The air was damp, almost heavy. I couldn't tell how long I had been walking. The world became only gray and laughter. The thin giggle of something small, then silence. The laughter stopped, all at once, and the fog stood still. I froze, straining to hear even the faintest shift. Nothing. It was as if the world had been muted. Even my heartbeat felt quieter. And that's when I realized I couldn't see the figure anymore. I turned slowly. The fog swirled like smoke around me. Every direction looked the same. A low panic rose in me, but I swallowed it. Tried to keep still. Then, behind me, soft, close, a breath. I turned sharply, and there he was, the child, standing just behind me, so close I could see the pale outline of his face. He didn't move, didn't laugh, just stood in silence. His clothes looked damp, as if they had been there too long. His eyes were dark, unfocused, fixed on me but not seeing me. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came. Only breath, shallow and quiet. The fog curled around him. Thin strands wrapped his arms, his shoulders, like it belonged to him, and then he smiled. Not the sound of laughter this time, just a slow, knowing smile. Small lips curved upward, still and empty. I stepped back. The ground beneath me felt softer than before, as if I were sinking into it. He didn't follow, didn't need to. His presence clung to the air itself. I blinked, and the fog shifted. The child was gone, only gray, only silence. Only me, standing alone in the mist. I stayed there for a long time, afraid to move, afraid to breathe too loudly. When the fog finally thinned, I found myself back where I started, the path behind me untouched, but the air still felt heavy. And when I closed my eyes, I could almost hear it, that faint giggle, waiting for me to follow again. The air was cool that night. A late autumn breeze carrying a faint sweetness I couldn't place. The road stretched longer than it should have. Gravel under my shoes, the hush of trees on both sides. I thought I was alone, until the fog parted, and I saw lanterns, pale golden lights swaying, strung across a cluster of houses. A village I had never noticed on any map. The cobblestones glowed faintly in their warmth, and in the center, a feast, long wooden tables. Plates set out with bread, fruit, steaming bowls of something rich and spiced. Pitchers of dark wine catching the lantern flame. Dozens of people sat at the tables, men, women, even children, all dressed in plain clothes, their hands placed neatly on their laps. Their eyes closed, every face was tilted upward, as if waiting, as if listening, but no one spoke. Not even a breath stirred. I stepped closer. The wood of the benches groaned under their stillness, but no one shifted. The bread stayed untouched. The wine glass in front of a man's pale hand reflected me, small and out of place. I wanted to whisper a greeting, but the silence pressed against my chest, like it wanted me to remain quiet, too. I sat at the edge of the table. The food smelled real, sharp, warm, inviting. But when I reached for a piece of fruit, I froze. A woman beside me, her lips parted slightly. Her tongue was still. Her eyelids trembled, as if she were caught in a dream. The lantern above flickered, and for a moment, I thought I heard a hum, low, almost below hearing. Not from any voice, but from the ground beneath the table. The plates rattled softly, though no one moved. And when I blinked, the lanterns went out. Darkness washed the street in one breath. The glow gone. Only moonlight remained. I looked back to the tables, empty. No villagers, no plates. No bowls of steaming food. The benches were bare, dusty, cracked with age. A broken lantern lay rusting in the dirt. Its glass shattered, its string torn loose. The air smelled of damp wood now. Not food, not spice. And I stood in the middle of it. The silence louder than before. I turned toward the houses. Their shutters hung crooked, rotting. No candlelight in their windows. No smoke rising from their chimneys. Just hollow frames, abandoned long ago. The breeze moved through the village, and for a second I swore I saw them again. Figures at the tables, eyes closed, waiting. But when I looked straight at them, there was only fog. The road stretched out beyond the square. I knew I had to walk it, but each step felt heavier, as though something still sat behind me. At the table, still waiting, and in the corner of my ear, a faint hum lingered. Soft, endless, like it would never stop. The hills were quiet that autumn. Dry grass bent in the wind. The air smelled of cold earth, as if winter was already waiting. I had been walking for hours, looking for something old, something the villagers spoke of only in half-finished sentences. They warned me not to climb too far, not to stay after dusk, and most of all, never to sleep near the stone faces. But warnings never stop curiosity, and when I found them, I understood why people stayed away. The boulders weren't just rocks. Each one had a face, eyes carved into the surface, sunken and long. Mouths open just slightly, as if caught mid-breath. Time had worn them down. But still they looked alive. Their gaze seemed to follow. Their silence heavier than the wind. I touched one. The stone was colder than the air around it. Colder than anything should have been. The surface was rough, like cracked skin. I tried to laugh it off. Just old carvings. Remnants of some forgotten tribe, but the longer I stood, the more I felt watched. The sky dimmed. Fog slid between the ridges. The last bit of sun clung to the hills like fading fire. I should have gone back. But I wanted to know if the stories were true, if the rocks really whispered, so I stayed. I laid my blanket near one of the larger stones. Its face was tilted, looking down toward me. The eyes seemed hollow, like deep wells. The mouth stretched into something almost like a smirk. The night thickened. The air stilled. Only my breath, my heartbeat, and the silence pressed against me. Then, a murmur, I froze. It wasn't the wind. It was too close. It slid along the ground like breath in my ear. Another voice followed, soft, layered, like someone speaking through water. I sat up. The stone face was unchanged, but the whisper was stronger now, rising and falling like words I couldn't quite catch. I pressed my hands against my ears. It didn't help. The sound wasn't outside. It was inside the bones of the hill. A phrase broke through. One I understood. My name! I staggered back, staring at the stone. Its mouth seemed wider, only slightly, but wider. As if it had spoken, the whispers tangled together. So many voices, low, high, broken, all saying things I knew, things from my past. The wind picked up, but the grass didn't move. The fog didn't shift. Only the voices. I couldn't breathe. My chest ached as though something pressed down on me. I wanted to run, but my legs stayed heavy, rooted into the earth. The stone face leaned closer, or maybe it hadn't moved at all. It was impossible to tell. Its hollow eyes swallowed me, then silence. The whispers cut off. The night returned, still and pale. I don't remember sleeping, but somehow the blackness took me. When the first light broke, I woke stiff and shaking. The hills looked empty again. The stones silent. Almost harmless, I packed quickly, avoiding their eyes. But something pulled me back. Some weight behind me refusing to let go. I turned once more and froze. The largest boulder, the one I had slept beside, its face had changed. The hollow eyes, the long mouth. They were mine. Every line, every curve of cheek and chin carved into the stone. As if it had been waiting for me all along, I ran. Down through the grass, past the ridges. I didn't look back, but even now, whenever silence stretches too long, I feel them, those eyes carved in stone, watching from somewhere beyond the hills, waiting for me to return, and I wonder if other faces are there too. Faces of those who didn't leave. Faces of those who stayed. It was late summer. The dirt road was dry, cracked in places, still holding the memory of rain from the week before. The air was heavy with dust. A thin fog clung low to the ground, moving like something alive. I walked alone. The fields around me were quiet, except for the distant rustle of crickets hidden in the tall grass. That's when I noticed it, leaning against the side of an old oak. Someone had left a mirror there. It didn't belong. Too clean, too sharp in the middle of this forgotten road. The frame was chipped wood, the glass untouched. I should have kept walking. But I slowed down. I looked. At first, it was just me, my face, pale in the dim light, my body outlined by the fog. Then, something strange. My reflection moved. It didn't move wrong. Not at first. It simply stepped away. A perfect copy of me, walking backwards into the woods. I froze. I couldn't breathe. The reflection turned its head just slightly, as if listening to something deeper in the forest. Then it disappeared into the shadows between the trees. The glass returned to silence. My face stared back at me again. I thought maybe I had imagined it. The mind can twist things when you're tired, when the air is thick and the world feels too still. But I kept walking, and every few steps, I turned to look back. The mirror hadn't moved. It leaned there, waiting. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the moment. The way my double drifted away without hesitation, as if it knew where it was going. By morning, I convinced myself it was just a trick of light. I had to, because the road was the only way home. When I reached the tree again, the mirror was still there. This time I told myself not to look. I kept my eyes on the dirt, kept my pace steady, but my body betrayed me. I slowed down. I stopped. I turned. The glass was waiting, still and dark. My reflection blinked, and then it did something different. It smiled. A small, deliberate smile that didn't touch my own lips. I felt the air leave my chest. My mouth was dry. The reflection raised its hand. Fingers curled like it was waving, but I couldn't lift mine to return it. The fog pressed closer around me. I could hear nothing but my own breath. Too loud, too fast, and then the reflection stopped. It tilted its head, studying me, the way you'd study something you'd already caught. For a moment, it leaned forward as if it might press through the glass. The surface rippled. I stumbled back. The path behind me felt endless, dark. And when I looked again, the mirror only held my face. No smile, no wave. Just me. I left quickly. Didn't look back this time, but I couldn't escape the feeling that I hadn't walked away alone. That something else had followed me, step for step. The nights since have been strange. Sometimes when I pass a window, I think I see myself pausing too long inside the glass, holding still when I move, or moving when I stay still, and twice now, I've woken up to find the curtains in my room parted. The dark glass of the window open to the night. As though something had been watching, I told myself it was nothing. But I can't shake the memory, that first reflection, walking away into the trees, knowing exactly where it was going, and that second one. The smile, like it already understood something I didn't. The mirror is probably still there, leaning against the oak, waiting for whoever walks the road next. And maybe one day, if I ever pass it again, the reflection won't walk away at all. Maybe this time it will wait for me. The fog was thicker than usual that night. It clung to the trees, soft and heavy as though it didn't want to move. The ridge above the valley was barely visible, but through the haze, I saw it. A tower, tall, made of pale stone, faintly glowing in the mist. I froze. There had never been a tower there before. The ridge was just rock and sparse grass. Nothing more. Yet on nights like this, it would appear. A solitary shape. Silent. As though it had been standing there for centuries, waiting. By morning, it was always gone. Not a trace left. Only bare ridge. Only silence. I had seen it twice before, but I never dared to climb. Not until that night. Something pulled me. Something quiet. A breath beneath the fog. A hum I could feel in my chest. I followed the slope upward, each step slower than the last. Damp grass brushing my shoes. The world behind me fading into pale white. Halfway up, I looked back. The village below had vanished. No lamps, no paths, just fog. The tower rose above me now. Closer, clearer. Its surface was stone, darkened with moss, cracked in places. But it glowed, as though the mist itself gave it light. No windows, no sound. Just a single door at the base. It was open, waiting. The air was still. No rustling leaves, no distant dogs. Only my own breath, slow, shallow. I stepped closer. The wood of the door was blackened, weathered. It should have been heavy, but it didn't creak. It moved gently as if breathing inside. Only darkness. a hollow that seemed endless. The ridge behind me was silent, too silent, as though even the fog refused to make a sound. I leaned forward, listening. No echo, no wind, just nothing. The stone arch around the doorway was damp, cold against my hand. And as I stood there, I felt something strange. The tower was taller now. I hadn't noticed it growing, but it was. Each time I blinked, it reached higher. Stretching upward into the mist, my heart was loud in my ears. But the rest of the world was still, I whispered, though I didn't mean to. Is anyone here? The word dissolved instantly. Swallowed. Like the tower had taken it in. I stepped back. The door remained open. But something about it had changed. It wasn't waiting anymore. It was watching. The ridge beneath my feet felt softer, like the ground wasn't ground at all. As though I stood on something breathing, I shut my eyes, held them tight. When I opened them, the tower was gone. I was standing at the summit, alone. Only the fog drifting past in pale waves. No stones, no cracks, no door. I turned in circles, but there was nothing. Just open air, empty ridge, and yet, when I looked down at my hand, the skin was damp, as though it had been resting against cold stone. I walked home slowly. The fog parted, letting the valley return. The lamps of the village blinked faintly in the distance. The world seemed normal again, but in my mind, I can still see that door. Open, breathing, waiting. And some nights, when the mist is heavy, I feel it watching from the ridge. Not there, but never truly gone. It was autumn. The air had grown thin. Every step scattered dry leaves across the forest floor. The woods were quiet at first, the kind of silence that pressed against the ears. But then, there was something else, a low vibration, like a hum, rolling through the ground, through the trees, through me. It was faint, almost musical. I thought it was the wind, but the air was still. The branches didn't move. The hum deepened. Not quite a song, but not a noise either. A voice without words. It pulsed. Every few seconds. Like breathing. The trees seemed to sway with it, even though the night was calm. I stood still for a long time, listening. And then, I realized I wasn't alone. A shape moved further in. No lantern. No footsteps. Just a darker outline among the trunks. The hum grew louder when I noticed it. Almost like it wanted me to follow. And somehow I did. Each step carried me deeper. My shoes sank into damp soil. The air grew heavier. The song, clearer. It began to form tones. Layers of sound rising, falling. Like voices in harmony. Low, steady, endless. But they weren't singing a song. Not one I knew. It was more like they were building something. A pattern. A rhythm. I tried to turn back. My chest tightened. But the moment I hesitated, the melody shifted. Sweet, inviting, almost tender. It felt wrong to leave, as though the song itself needed me. The forest thickened. Branches bent overhead. The moonlight thinned to a pale silver haze. And then I heard it. My name. Clear. Softly sung between the notes. I froze. The leaves stilled. Even my breath sounded too loud. I waited. Maybe it was imagination. But then again, my name, whispered like a lullaby. It wasn't coming from one place. It came from everywhere. The trees, the ground, the air itself, I whispered back. A mistake. The moment I spoke, the voices changed. Quicker, urgent. The song trembled now. Not gentle anymore. More like chanting, calling. I stumbled forward, trying to see. Something flickered in the distance. A pale light moving slowly between the trunks. The song wrapped around it, pulling me closer. Every bone in me said to stop, but I couldn't. The light wasn't fire. It wasn't lantern glow. It was liquid somehow, like a shimmer hanging in the air. Inside it, shadows swayed, tall, bending, without form. Their movements matched the song, each rise, each fall. I stood there, trembling. And for a moment I felt them notice me. The song cracked. The hum stuttered, then silence. Every sound pulled back into the trees. The forest held its breath. I backed away. One step, then another. The light stayed still. The shadows bent as though watching. Then, so faint I almost missed it. A single voice, alone. It whispered my name again, this time closer. As if it stood just behind me, I didn't turn. I couldn't. I ran. The silence followed. No branches broke. No leaves stirred. Just the pale echo of that final note. By the time I reached the forest's edge, the hum had returned. Distant again. Almost harmless. But even now, when nights are quiet and the air is still, I hear it. That low, endless song. Waiting at the tree line, waiting. For me to step back in, I came into the valley at dusk. The air was thick yet strangely still. The grass bent with the breeze. But the trees did not sway. I thought it was the fog at first. The way it clung to the slopes. The way the light from my lantern pressed against it, soft and pale. But when I reached the stone path below, I noticed something was wrong. The lantern glowed, and the ground stayed empty. No shadow followed me. I turned, holding the lantern higher. My boots were real. The stones were solid, and yet there was no darkness beneath me. The village lay quiet, almost waiting. Houses of timber and faded plaster lined the narrow street. Their windows had no glass, just shutters, closed tight. A man passed me, walking slowly, hands folded behind his back. The lanterns that hung above him lit his face in soft gold, but nothing stretched behind him. No trace of shape, no outline at all. He did not look at me. No one did. Others appeared in the corners, slipping along the alleys, all carrying their light carefully. Each one whispered as they walked, their voices never rising above a breath. I tried to speak, to ask where I was. But the nearest woman raised her finger to her lips. She shook her head gently and kept moving, as though my voice could unravel something. I pressed on. The cobblestones grew damp. Lanterns burned everywhere, hung from wooden posts, from ropes across the square. Their glow filled every corner, but the streets remained flat and bare. It was like the light had no weight. And then I saw it. In the corner of a shop window, a shard of broken mirror leaned against the wall. I froze. The woman beside it, her face reflected, her body too. But nothing beneath her feet. The glass was cracked, as though it had grown tired of holding the truth. When she noticed me watching, she turned it over, pressing the mirror flat to the wall. And she walked away without a word. I realized then they avoided glass. Every pane of it was gone, every mirror removed. The thought made me shiver. I reached for my lantern and I checked again. No shadow. Not even a faint trace. I whispered to myself. Maybe it was the fog. Maybe the angle of the light. But the words didn't sound true. At the end of the street, a church stood silent, its doors left open. Inside, lanterns swayed from the rafters. Their glow spilled across the pews. Dozens of people sat in silence, their heads bowed, their lips moving faintly in prayer. But the floor was clean, untouched, no shadows between the benches. I stepped back. The air felt heavier. And when I turned around, I noticed something else. The hills behind me had closed in. The road I entered from, I could no longer see it. Just rows of houses fading deeper into the valley. My lantern flickered. For a moment, I thought I saw my own shadow return, a thin outline stretching just a few inches from my boots, but then it melted away. Gone, as though it had been swallowed. I tried to leave the village that night. I walked until my legs grew sore. Every turn, every bend led me back to the same square. The people passed me quietly, never meeting my eyes. Some carried baskets, some lanterns, all drifting in patterns I could not follow, and I realized I was one of them now. The shadow I once had, the proof that I existed in light, would not return. I still don't know what this place is, or how long I've been here, but I wake to the same pale glow every day. The lantern beside me burns steady, but nothing stirs beneath me, no outline, no trace, just the light and the silence of a village where shadows have no home. And I wonder quietly if anyone outside will notice that mine never came back. The valley was always restless at night. Crickets, the faint rush of the stream, the low call of owls perched on the ridge. But that evening, it changed. The air felt thinner, not cold, not warm, just hollow. I remember standing by the fence, looking out across the dark stretch of grass. waiting for the usual night chorus to rise. Instead, there was only stillness, no rustling leaves, no flutter of wings. Even the dogs in the distance, the ones that barked at nothing, had fallen quiet. It was not silence. It was something else, a crawling hush, like it had weight. Like it moved, I felt it sliding through the valley, a slow tide, spreading wider and wider, swallowing everything in its path. The crickets stopped first, their endless rhythm breaking into fragments. Then gone, then the water. I looked toward the stream, a faint glint of moonlight over the stones. But the rush had faded. No trickle, no splash, as if the current had turned to glass. I held my breath, and even that seemed too loud. But then I realized I couldn't hear it. The inhale, the exhale, the small rasp of my lungs, all of it. Swallowed, I pressed my palm against my chest, searching. There was movement, but no sound. My heartbeat was silent. The crawling hush had reached me. I wanted to call out, to test if my voice still existed, but my lips wouldn't open. The weight of it pressed against me. Heavy, invisible, it was not emptiness. It was presence. Every step I tried to take felt muffled. My boots touched the earth, but I felt no crunch, no shift of soil, only the vibration through my bones, and it crept closer. Not as wind, not as shadow, but as absence. The valley was vast, yet it felt smaller by the second, as if walls were closing in, unseen. I turned toward the trees. Their branches trembled in the pale light, but there was no whisper in their sway. Even when one cracked and bent low, it broke in silence. A jagged shape in the dark? I wanted to run, but where could I go if every place was being devoured? The hush crawled into me, through my ears, through my ribs, a stillness that felt like drowning, without water. I looked up to the ridge, hoping for the shape of an owl or the flicker of a wing. But the sky was pale and empty. Even the stars seemed faint, muted. Time stretched strangely, seconds bent. It was impossible to know if minutes had passed or only a breath. I tried to remember what sound felt like. The laughter of children in the day, the creak of the windmill, the whisper of my own voice in prayer. All of it was gone. The silence inside me grew tighter. A coil pulling, a hand closing. I touched the fence post beside me, rough wood beneath my fingers. And I waited. Something shifted then. Not sight, not touch, just a suggestion. The hush pressed closer, curling around me, crawling over the hills, creeping across the stream bed. Searching. It was not random. It was not natural. It was hunting, and I was no longer sure I remained separate from it, because the more I stood still, the more I felt the hush within me, my own silence crawling outward. It no longer mattered if I moved, or if I stayed. The hush had found me, and there was nothing left to hear, only a still valley, a pale night, and the quiet weight pressing down, waiting, listening, for the next sound to take away. The air was damp that evening, the kind of damp that seeps into your clothes, and makes the trees look darker than they are. I was walking along the ridge path. The sun had already sunk low. A pale orange glow stretched across the horizon, but under the forest canopy, it felt almost like night. That's when I saw it. A shape, tucked into a clearing where the ferns parted. A shrine. Small, weather-worn. Its wooden beams sagged under moss, the stone base cracked with age. It looked abandoned, but in front of it, offerings a bowl of rice, fresh fruit, and a bundle of folded paper charms that hadn't yet yellowed. Someone had been here, recently. And yet, there were no footprints in the dirt. The forest pressed quiet around me. No wind, no birds, only the faint hum of dusk insects. I stepped closer. The shrine was small enough to kneel before. Inside, the shadows clung thick. No statue, no figure, just a dark hollow where something should have been. I crouched. The wood creaked under my hand as I brushed away moss. The smell was damp, like old earth, mixed with something faintly sweet, and then a sound, low, barely rising, chanting. I froze. It was coming from inside, a thin, wavering rhythm. Syllables I couldn't quite place, but the shrine was empty. I leaned closer, straining to hear. The sound circled me. One voice, then another, layered together, like echoes from somewhere deep. My breath felt too loud in my chest. I whispered into the hollow. "Hello?" The chanting stopped. The silence that followed was heavy. It pressed against the trees. Even the insects had gone quiet. My knees ached against the stone step as I reached out. The altar was cool beneath my fingertips, smooth, polished from years of touch. And then something touched back. Not hard, not violent, just the faintest pressure, like another hand mirroring mine from the other side of the wood. My skin went cold. I pulled away. But the pressure lingered, as though my hand was still held in place even after it was gone. The shadows inside the shrine shifted, just slightly. Like the hollow had grown deeper, I could feel something watching me. Not with anger, not with kindness, simply watching. A breeze stirred the moss above. The rice bowl toppled, spilling grains into the dirt. The fruit remained. Untouched, I wanted to run, but my legs were heavy, locked to the ground. The chanting began again. Softer this time, not from within the shrine, but from the trees behind me. I turned. Empty forest. Only trunks and pale streaks of light breaking through. When I looked back, the offerings were gone. The bowl was upright again. The rice full, the fruit arranged as if no hand had disturbed it. And my fingerprints were still pressed into the altar's dust. I backed away slowly. The chanting thinned, dissolving into the hum of night insects. The moss on the beams dripped faintly, though the air was dry. The wood seemed to breathe, and though the shrine grew small in the distance, I felt that pressure still, faintly in my hand, like the touch had followed me out of the clearing. Even now, when I close my eyes, I can feel it. Cool, patient, as though waiting for me to return. It was late autumn. The hills were bare, the grass brittle beneath my shoes. Cold wind pressed against my ears. The villagers had told me about the staircase, carved into the side of the hill, leading down into the earth. No one remembered when it was built, only that you weren't supposed to count the steps. I thought it was superstition. Just another story to keep children from wandering. But curiosity has a way of pushing past warnings. The opening was half hidden by moss. The first stone step crumbled under my weight. My hand brushed the wall, damp and rough. I began to descend. The light behind me thinned quickly, swallowed by the spiral. My breath followed me down, uneven, shallow. The air felt older with every step, as if I was breathing through centuries. The silence was heavy, but not empty. I counted. 1, 2, 3. My voice stayed low. It sounded strange against the stone, like the air didn't want to carry it forward. I lost track of how long I'd been walking. The air cooled, clung to my skin. The stairs narrowed, pressing closer around me. 39, 40, 41. That was when I heard it, a faint echo. My own voice, but softer, delayed. I froze, thinking it was just my mind playing tricks. But when I whispered 42, the number came back, whispered from beneath me. I gripped the wall. Every stone was slick with condensation. The spiral yawned down into darkness, endless. I tried again. 43. And there it was. A breathless, broken repetition, somewhere below. I leaned forward, listening. It was almost like a child's voice, or maybe my own, cracked and thinner. I should have stopped, turned back. But the pull of the stairs was stronger than caution. 50, 51. The whispers grew clearer, climbing toward me. Each number I said, each one was given back. Not an echo, something repeating. My steps slowed. My mouth went dry, but I couldn't stop counting. 60, 61. My throat trembled as I forced the words. The voice below waited. It waited for me to speak first. Then answered, like a mirror. I realized it wasn't beneath me anymore. It was closer. I pressed my back to the wall. My lips sealed shut, but I could hear breathing, uneven, shallow, almost against my ear. A hush filled the stairwell. I thought if I didn't speak, it couldn't follow. But silence. It pressed harder than any sound. The air shivered. Stone dust shifted beneath my boots. The darkness leaned forward, patient. I couldn't bear it. I whispered 62. And the whisper came back. But this time it wasn't alone. There was laughter, soft, broken, like teeth chattering in the cold. It crawled up the spiral, brushing against the walls. My legs weakened. I stumbled upward, hands scraping the stone. The staircase tilted, as if the earth itself had moved. I didn't dare look back. I just climbed. My breath loud, ragged, but still mine. I don't know how long it took. The numbers clung to me, stuck inside my head. 63, 64. Even when I stopped saying them, they kept counting on their own. When the pale light of the hillside finally returned, I fell onto the grass, eyes burning from sudden sky. Behind me, the stairs waited. Open. Silent. But the counting hasn't stopped. Even now, when I close my eyes, I hear the next number waiting, and I know someday I'll have to go back down to finish what I began. The valley was always quiet in autumn. The mist rolled down from the hills and rested low, clinging to the stone fences and crooked trees. Lanterns swayed on porches, faint halos in the pale dark. I used to walk there at night, when the air was heavy and still. It was during those nights that I first heard the hoofbeats. Not sharp, not hurried, slow, measured, almost as if the earth itself exhaled with every step. The sound didn't echo. It simply pressed into the fog and stayed there, close to the skin. I thought it was just an old horse from the neighboring farm, until I noticed the silence it carried with it. Every cricket fell quiet. Every branch stood motionless. And one by one, every lantern on the path flickered and went out. That was the first time I felt it passing. The presence on the road. The pale rider. They say he's been there for centuries, drifting through valleys where no wind stirs. His horse. A towering thing, its skin stretched tight across its ribs. No eyes in its sockets. Just hollow space that seemed to draw the mist deeper into its skull. And the rider himself. Clothed not in black, but in a pale fabric, loose and flowing. So faint it seemed woven from the fog itself. A figure that swayed gently in the saddle, yet never bent, never turned, until that night. I was standing by the fence halfway between two lanterns. The light was dim, and the fog moved like slow breath between the posts. Then the sound came again. That rhythm, hoof against soil, dull, heavy, final. The air pressed colder against my skin. The lantern beside me shivered and went out, leaving me in half-darkness. And then, from the fog, the horse emerged. Its hooves didn't disturb the grass. Its shape seemed both there and not. I could see through the legs as if they were made of smoke. But the weight of each step was undeniable, pressing into my chest. The rider's head lifted. Not quickly, not with force. Just slowly, like drifting ash turning in the air. And though the mist obscured his face, I felt eyes. Eyes that were not there. Staring through me, he raised a hand. A pale hand, long and delicate, as though carved from bone. And he held it still in the air. A motion that was neither threat nor greeting. Just acknowledgement. As if to say, I see you now, I couldn't move. My breath caught, shallow and weak. The fog pressed against my lips, tasting of iron. The silence around me deepened until the world felt emptied. For a moment, I thought he wanted me to follow. The tilt of his hand seemed to beckon. But before I could understand, the lantern farther down the path sputtered. It went out. And then the next, and then the next, he lowered his arm. The horse stepped forward, gliding more than walking. They dissolved back into the mist, each step pulling the silence with them. And soon there was nothing. When the last shadow faded, the night returned. The crickets began their song again. The lanterns hummed faintly, their glass rattling in the cold. But I stood frozen, every part of me hollowed by what I had seen. Some nights, when the fog gathers low, I walk again. I keep my lantern close, though I know it will not matter. And when the hoofbeats return, I do not run. I listen. Because in that stillness, I understand something unspoken. The pale rider is not passing through. He is waiting, and one night. He will stop again. He will raise his hand. And this time, I will not be left standing behind. The hut stood crooked at the edge of the clearing. Its roof sagged. The boards clung to one another as if afraid to collapse. I remember the air that night. Cool, damp, with a smell of moss. Everything around it felt forgotten. Inside, the walls were bare. No chairs, no hearth. Just one thing, a drum. It sat in the center of the room, low to the ground, its wood dark with rot. The skin stretched tight across it, though cracked with age. The kind of object that should have turned to dust years ago. I almost didn't step closer. But something about it, the way it seemed to wait, pulled me in. The silence deepened. Even the crickets outside seemed to stop. And then a faint beat. Soft, so soft I thought it came from me. From my own chest. I pressed a hand against my ribs. My heart knocked there. And the drum knocked back. Each thud mirrored the other. Perfectly. I stood frozen. The air heavy. The room breathing with me. At first I told myself it was the wind. Some trick in the wood. But the rhythm was too exact. When I held my breath, the drum waited. When my pulse quickened, it hurried too. The skin quivered with each beat. Dust trembled from its rim. It was listening. I tried to step back, but my heel caught on the warped boards. The moment I stumbled, the drum lurched, a double strike. Harder, like it laughed at me. I didn't run. I couldn't. Somewhere inside, a part of me wanted to know how far it would go. The days that followed, I returned again and again. Each night it welcomed me with its hollow pulse, sometimes faint, sometimes deep, always mine. It grew comforting in a way, to feel a second heart waiting in the dark, to know that I wasn't entirely alone, but curiosity rots. It digs until nothing safe is left. One evening I lingered too long. The sky outside had gone pale with the moon, and in the hut, the drum slowed once, then silence. I waited, pressed my hand to my chest, and felt nothing. The space where my heart should have lived was still. Panic hollowed me out. I pressed harder, nails scraping skin. I could feel only emptiness, then a single thud. From the drum, weak, delayed, like it struggled. I staggered forward, placed my hand against the cracked skin, and felt the faintest flutter beneath. Not wood, not leather, something alive. It was carrying my heartbeat now. Each strike slower, weaker, I whispered for it to give it back. But the hut swallowed the words. The silence deepened. The drum shuddered once. The final beat, and then nothing. I sank beside it, clutching at the stillness inside me, waiting for the next pulse, praying for one more. It never came, and in that silence, I understood. The drum had been hollow for a reason. It was waiting for something to fill it. Now it waits with me, empty, still, listening for the next heart to wander in. The village lay silent, buried in mist, stone houses leaning inward like they were listening. It was early autumn, the air brittle, leaves scattered in circles across the cobblestones. No one lived here anymore, not for years. Yet each dawn, the square was never empty. At first I thought it was birds, wings brushing the rooftops. But no, these were voices, men, women, children, hundreds of them, folding into one another. They rose all at once as the sun cracked the fog, like a congregation gathered in secret. I stood at the edge of the square, not daring to step closer. The voices carried, soft, overlapping. Too many to count. But there was no one. The houses hollow, windows boarded, doors swollen shut with rot. Still the murmurs poured out, from the fountain, from the empty benches, from the air itself. I couldn't understand their words. Just fragments, a greeting, a laugh, the sigh of someone tired. The longer I stayed, the more it felt like I had intruded, like the village wasn't as empty as it looked. That night I stayed in one of the houses. The roof half collapsed. Dust climbing the corners of the room, I spoke quietly to myself, trying to test the silence. Just a few words, a few scattered thoughts. The house swallowed them whole, like nothing had changed. But at dawn, the voices began again. This time I recognized them. Not strangers, not old villagers. They were mine. Every word I had whispered to the cracked walls, every half-thought, every hesitation, spoken back to me in 100 shifting tones. Some repeated my words exactly. Others stretched them, bent them, turned them inside out. A joke I had murmured the night before returned as a child's laughter. A small prayer came back as a chant, echoed by dozens of unseen throats. The air thickened. I pressed my back against the wall, but the walls breathed too. It was no longer an echo. It was a rehearsal. My voice broken into pieces and scattered among ghosts. I wanted to run, but the voices followed. Not louder, never loud, just enough to fill my head with a trembling hum. I left the square behind, past the church with no roof, past the orchard where fruit shriveled on the branches, but even there at the farthest edge my words still traveled, spoken back to me as though the whole village had become my mouth, the sky pale with morning, the horizon quiet, yet the air still shifting, like static under breath. I understood then. The village wasn't abandoned. It was waiting for someone to speak, to give it something new to carry, and I had given it too much already. Now each dawn I wake before the light. I listen from the hills. And still, I hear myself, my words cut apart and repeated long after I've forgotten them. The village remembers. The village speaks, even when I no longer do. And it will go on, until the last word I ever breathe belongs to it too. The grass was tall that summer, dry, yellowed at the tips. I remember the trail was nearly gone, almost erased by time. No one walked it anymore. It curved through the trees, downhill, where the air grew cooler. And at the end, half buried in soil, was the door. It wasn't a house, not a cellar. Just a door, lying flat, as if the earth itself had grown over it. Iron rings, rusted chains crossed in an X. A lock so corroded I thought it had fused to the metal. I pressed my hand to it once, cold even in the heat. Something faint? Like a hum carried through the ground, I pulled back quickly. The silence after was worse than the sound itself. For weeks I went back. Each time the grass grew higher, the trees closed in, and yet the door remained clear, as though the earth refused to cover it again. At night I'd dream of it, the chains tightening, vibrating softly, and the hum inside my skull steady as breath. Then, one evening, the storm came. Wind tore at the forest. Branches cracked. And I thought of the door. I returned the next morning. The trail was soaked, the earth soft beneath my shoes. When I reached the clearing, the chains were broken, snapped, scattered in the grass like discarded bones. The door was open, only an inch, maybe two. But from that gap, the air spilled out, cold, so cold it burned against my skin, and with it a faint whisper, curling through the silence. I leaned closer. Not words at first, just fragments, like static in my ears, but then I thought I heard my name. I stumbled back. The forest was still. Not even a bird moved in the branches. That night, the whisper followed me home. It rose with the hum of my refrigerator. It threaded through the pipes in the walls. When I lay in bed, it pressed close. Not outside, inside. A voice repeating something too soft to catch. Each breath timed with mine. I tried to ignore it. But ignoring something inside you only makes it louder. By the third night, I stopped sleeping. The whisper stretched, pulling syllables I almost recognized. Old words, odd childhood memories, things I hadn't thought of in years. The swing set behind my first house, the color of my mother's dress, the way the air smelled before winter, but they weren't my thoughts anymore. They belonged to the whisper. I returned to the trail. I had to. The door was wider now, 4 inches, maybe 5. The soil around it seemed to sag as though the ground itself was sinking. I stood over it, listening. The whisper rose, echoing out of the black. A second voice now, then a third. They overlapped, tangled. But each seemed to know me. Each spoke pieces of my life, moments only I should have remembered. I reached for the door. My fingertips brushed the wood. It was warm this time, like a pulse. I yanked my hand back. The warmth lingered. It beat against my palm even after I let go. I ran, but the whisper ran with me, down the trail, through the trees, all the way to my house. That night I woke to silence, the kind of silence that presses into your chest, holding you still. The whisper was gone, but the hum was in the floor. It trembled beneath the boards, steady, patient, as though the earth beneath the house had opened. I pressed my ear to the ground, and I swear I felt the breath of the door, soft, slow, waiting. I don't go back to the trail anymore. I avoid that part of the forest completely. But the whispers still find me. Sometimes in the static of the radio, sometimes in the hollow rush of the sink. Sometimes when I'm almost asleep, I hear the chains again, tightening, dragging, and I wonder. If the door was never meant to stay shut, if something somewhere is calling my name, waiting for me to answer, and maybe one day I will.